Welcome to Building the Basics, where we walk you through the whys, whats, and hows of gun ownership. On this episode today, we got Dom, the used gun guy from White Birch Armory, and we'll be talking about dry fire, live fire, and how do you get the most out of your range day. So Dom, I'll turn it over to you. Let's have a little bit of an intro, and we can get into the meat and potatoes of the episode today.
Cool. What's up, man? I'm glad to be here. Honestly, honored considering some of the people that have come before me. Christy and Dan, Ashley, just to name a few. You guys have done a really good job so far with the podcast. I've enjoyed listening to it. About me. So I like to emphasize this point. I am a regular guy and a civilian who has chosen to make a career out of the gun industry. I've found from a young age, I was watching videos like Demolition Ranch, honestly, is one of the big ones that come to mind. Congrats to him for just recently retiring, by the way. That's super cool. Happy for the guy. And really, from a young age, I was just someone who enjoyed firearms, both through YouTube content from channels such as him or video games. Video games is a big one. In the episode with Ashley, you guys talked about how there's a whole emerging segment in the gun industry that is really taken a lot of their inspiration from video games. I would say that definitely applies to me to some degree. I wasn't allowed to own certain video game consoles until a certain age, but I do still remember Modern Warfare 2 lobbies and Battlefield 4 on the PS3 and on the PS4. As far as where I'm at currently, I'm 25. I graduated from the University of New Hampshire in 2021. In making the decision to come up to University of New Hampshire, it really came down to UNH or UConn for me, and a big part of my decision for coming up here was that UNH had a shooting sports team. I found that really cool. My first job, which we'll get into here in a bit, was actually at the shooting range at Scout Camp, so to be able to move up to a state with the motto of live free or die, and then take part in a sport, which I really wanted to learn more about at the college that I was going to, was super cool, so I'm happy to have graduated from there and to be where I'm at now in my career.
That's awesome. And then I'm assuming Dan Giebers, another one of our guests, he's an instructor over at White Birch. I'm assuming that he was your instructor over at UNH.
Yeah, man. Dan was my instructor, teacher, really I'll say like mentor for the shooting sports team at UNH while I was there. He always joked that I was the guy who tended to kind of be the armorer while I was involved with the team, because I always loved to take the shotguns apart, clean them, and help people if they had any mechanical issues with the guns during our practices.
So you already had a basic understanding of everything before coming?
To some degree. Yeah. I would say the internet's a phenomenal thing. It's both terrifying and amazing, and in the gun space, if you know how to look for things, you can definitely figure a lot of things out. Like if you look at a gun and you're not sure how to take it apart, someone probably knows how, and there's probably a YouTube video on it. That is a huge resource in this day and age.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, tell us of a little bit of your resume and kind of how you got to where you are now of what you do at White Birch.
So again, growing up, I did not grow up around firearms. I did grow up in a pro-gun family. I'd say a conservative family in a, of course, unfortunately, very blue state of Connecticut. However, there weren't, at least that I know of to this day, there were not guns in the home while I was growing up until I helped my dad purchase his first firearm after being in the industry for a couple years. So really my first experience with firearms was at Scout Camp. It was, through Cub Scouts. They had a BB gun range. I remember each year I would get a patch basically for shooting well enough with the BB guns on the BB gun range. And then moving into a couple summers in my high school years, I actually spent 2 summers, one volunteering and the second working as an employee at the Scout Camp that I grew up at on the shooting sports range. So it was teaching merit badges, watching the kids on the range, basically range safety officer, and then also maintaining and cleaning stuff throughout those summers. Moving up to New Hampshire, like I said, I was on the shotgun sports side of the shooting team at UNH for a couple of years. That was a lot of fun. At this point, I don't actually have a shotgun, but I do think shotgun sports are a very, I'll say, practical way to get into the sport. There's a long history of sporting in terms of hunting with that side of the industry, and that's super cool. And also those over-under shotguns are just gorgeous, extremely expensive. Yeah, I think Dan has some that are, well north of the five-figure range.
I was gonna say, yeah, in our episode that we had with Dan, he was saying I think his shotgun is like five figures. I forget the exact number, but yeah, for our listeners, go check out the episode with Dan. He gets into all the intricacies of shotguns and ownership and what you can do with them and why he likes them. So yeah, it's a good plug for his episode for
Yeah,
sure.
man. He knows his stuff when it comes to
Yeah.
shotguns, and like I said, those over/under shotguns are just gorgeous. The engraving and inlays and the woodwork that goes into them is really really cool. So moving from UNH, towards the end of my time at UNH, 2020 to 2022. I got a job at Kittery Trading Post in Maine. There I worked as a sales associate, and part-time through my time there, I got tapped by one of the managers, and he asked me if I wanted to step up and work as one of their firearms traders. So trader is what they call someone who appraises pre-owned products, being ammo, accessories, optics, and firearms that people bring to the store looking to sell for either cash or store credit. So I did that in the last year or so of my time there. Once graduating from UNH, after I'll say trying out a real job for a couple months, I had like essentially a marketing job. That, although I learned a lot, it did not end up working out, and I was working 7 days a week between that and Kittery Trading Post, which was a lot.
That's not fun.
So eventually I told both of those jobs, hey, it's time for me to move on, and then I kind of took the leap to White Birch Armory, which is where I am now and where I've been ever since then in 2022, late 2021, and really it's been a joy. I started out here as a sales associate and range safety officer. Last year, I functioned as a supervisor on the retail sales floor, helping manage and keep things running efficiently and train in the new guys that came into the company. And then also in that time, I worked as one of the used gun buyers for the store. Really thankful for what I've learned along that time with Chris Rowe, who also came with me from Kittery Trading Post over to White Birch Armory. And just recently, I stepped into the role of their, what we would call the pre-owned product specialist. So at this time, I am kind of heading up and taking charge of their used gun program, whether it's keeping track of metrics, putting stuff on sale as it gets to a certain age, or really kind of developing the direction for the program going forward.
Cool. Thanks, Dom. So, getting a little bit more into the main content here, talking about dry fire and live fire and range preparation and all that kind of stuff. So, if you listened to our last episode, you heard us talk a lot about training aids and dry fire aids, and we didn't go as in depth into actual dry fire exercises as we probably should have. So we've been wanting to have Dom on for quite some time. We finally were able to make it work time wise, and we had some snowstorms and all that, so it just kind of threw off the schedule a little bit here. But yeah, we brought this idea up to Dom a while ago, and he was like, "Yeah, would love to kind of go a little bit more in depth into what I do and all that." So yeah, Dom, tell us a little bit about things that you like to do at home, or things that you feel like when you're on the sales floor talking to a new or potential gun owner. What are things that you recommend that they do at home?
So one of the big things that I drive home to people in my time selling firearms over the past 4 or 5 years here, and that I really love to harp on, is that people think of going to the range as the only time that they practice their shooting abilities. But the reality is that most of shooting ability can be practiced not at the range. It can be practiced, perfectly safely in the home, without any ammo present in the room, of course, being safe and making sure you're pointing the gun in a safe direction, and all other safety rules apply. The only thing you really practice at the range is, in the case of, we'll say, handgun shooting at an indoor 25-yard range like White Birch has, is recoil control. Of course, you can do movement at the range and stuff like that if you're taking a class or if you're involved in some sort of league. But even that movement, that advanced movement or manipulations such as reloads, malfunction clearing, all of that can be practiced really safely and effectively in the home, and that's a huge thing I drive home to people. And when I sell someone a gun, something I love to tell them is take this gun home and play with it. And it sounds silly, borderline immature to say that while I'm handing someone a firearm across a counter. But I guess what that means to me is at its rawest form, I think dry fire starts from just handling the firearm. I take for granted the fact that I get essentially paid to play with guns all day, which is a dream for a lot of people. But the amount of skills that are practiced just by simply dropping a magazine, racking a slide, reinserting the magazine, locking the slide back, sending it forward, and pulling the trigger, like that repetitious motion that I do all day, every day without thinking about it. If you were to take your gun out of the box when you first get it home from the gun store, doing that for 10, 15 minutes, as much as it may annoy your significant other in the other room, I think is really worth it. And then to build off of that, picking a light switch or something to really pull the trigger at, it helps drill home the fundamentals that will make your range time that much more useful and enjoyable.
Yeah, Dom, those are great points, and you're exactly right when it comes to the remedial actions, especially if it's your first purchase. Got to figure out how does this work, and hopefully you've done your research. If you're a new shooter, new firearms owner, you've done your research, trying to figure out where certain things are, where is that mag release. Sometimes they're in a different spot, all that, but it's extremely important to become familiar with your firearm, and that's where dry fire comes in. It's very interesting though. Like there's people who might not they might not do all of that research, and they might get home and try to wreck the slide, and they don't have the strength to wreck the slide. And it's a tricky situation because you really want people to be happy with their purchase. You want them to feel confident with their purchase, and sometimes you just need to encourage people as much as you can.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this comes back to, again, the sales process. I'll say somewhat vetting the person who's selling you the gun. When I'm selling someone a gun, I try my best to make sure that I'm addressing, obviously, the concerns of the person that's coming to purchase a firearm from me, but also that I'm giving them good advice. For example, I can probably countless times I've told someone to honestly go home and do more research before making a purchase. Again, before even getting home with the firearm or getting to the range with the firearm, I think it's really important that people determine what firearm they're going to purchase with adequate research behind it. And then they go into it and they realize, okay, yeah, I have, hand strength issues. And although I want this really small firearm, I really think I want this. After digging into it, I realized, okay, that might not be the right firearm for me. And if I can help people from my side of the counter avoid essentially spending thousands of their hard-earned dollars on these things that after training with it, whether it be, dry fire in the home or live fire on the range, if I can help people save their money and really make a well thought out purchase, that's really huge to me. I think that's really a duty that I have as someone working on the other side of the counter.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And you want to make sure that people are happy with their purchase, that they come away with it, excited and looking forward to, continuing their development and their growth as a responsible gun owner.
Totally.
So when it comes to dry fire, like what do say you just sold somebody a gun, right? And they ask, okay, well, let me get a couple boxes of ammo and this and that, and it's like, okay, well, in your head you're like, okay, well, I've gotten them ready for range day, but how do I make sure that I tell them some good information of, okay, between now and next week when you come in on a Saturday for your first range session, what do I need them to do, or what do I want them to do, or how should they start to be familiar? And you kind of went into it a little bit, but like, what are some exercises that you would maybe specifically say to them when it comes to that?
So it starts very simple. Like I said, dry fire, in my opinion, is more than just like, setting up some targets and then kind of like shooting, clearing your house in your underwear, basically. Like that's awesome. And that is technically dry fire. However, I do believe it's the simple manipulations that really, when you go to the range, they add up. Or when you go to set up a bunch of targets and kind of shoot them through the rooms of your house, figuratively, with dry fire. I think those manipulations where you're sitting there watching something and you're taking the magazine out or taking another mag out of your pocket, reloading, playing with slide lock. A big one is trigger. I'll say trigger discipline, but I don't necessarily mean finger on and off the trigger. By that I mean understanding how the trigger of your weapon actually functions, where it breaks, where it resets, and everything like that. One of the most common things I see with people when I'm ROing on them, when I'm the range safety officer, is you'll see a lot of slapping the trigger. And it's because part of it is nerves, because I still remember my first few times going onto a gun range, especially indoors. It's loud, it's scary, and I'm not going to deny that. But telling someone, okay, this is what your trigger is actually doing, and then walking them through take up, sponginess. In the case of some guns, you have one wall, you then have a little bit more creep and a second wall, and then that trigger finally breaks. Explaining that to someone and then telling them, you can go home and you can sit there and you can practice this. A lot of times I'll see a light bulb go off, or when I'm on the range, definitely I'll see the light bulb go off, and immediately you'll see someone go from at 5 yards pushing all their shots low left, 4 to 6 inches, to they're within an inch or two of where they're aiming. So trigger discipline in terms of controlling that trigger and understanding the creep, the break, the reset is honestly a huge aspect of dry fire that I try and tell people to really focus on.
One thing I'll bring up real quick, just I think we've talked about it in previous episodes, but just how there's different pounds of pressure that you need to put on the trigger in order to actuate the trigger. So you have double action, single action, double action only, striker fire. So each of those three setups is going to have a different feel for how much pressure you're going to have to put onto the trigger in order to make it go. But yeah, Dom, anything you want to add there?
I'd say here you kind of get into the importance of choosing a gun and understanding what you're choosing when you choose a gun or you go into a gun store looking for your first, second, third handgun. Your co-host talked about it a couple episodes ago where he mentioned his first gun, I think, or the first gun he got when he was out and purchased a gun.
The Rami?
Did he say the Rami or was it the 229 Legion, I thought?
Oh, he got his wife the Rami.
He got the
his
229
was the 229.
Legion.
Yeah, yeah.
And he mentioned, he joked about it being like not a great first gun, I'm sure partially because of the double single action trigger, which the reset on those triggers is phenomenal. I won't gush over it too much, but those triggers are pretty sweet. But my first gun also, as far as a handgun that I purchased for myself, was a double single action. It was a CZ P07. At this point, I've put thousands, I'd say countless thousands of rounds through the gun. I don't really keep track of round count. I just shoot stuff till it breaks and then fix the broken thing, because I think that's fun. But at this point, I've replaced the springs with better springs to make the trigger a little lighter and done other work to make the gun shoot better. But you compare fundamentally your double single action trigger versus your classic, Glock or SIG, what have you, striker fired trigger. And there's some nuances there between every different gun, of course, but understanding when you purchase a firearm that, okay, with a double single action, that first pull is going to be a lot heavier than every subsequent pull in most cases. Whereas with a striker fire, you have a consistent trigger pull every time, which is actually why currently, even though I love my P07, I've shot it a lot. I really like how it shoots. I'm kind of on this path in my journey through gun ownership that I'm really going back to just like a stock Glock, because the consistency and reliability of a good striker fired system like that of Glock, minus if you can get over the grip angle, which some people love, some people hate. I think the consistency of a striker fired trigger is really great for a first time gun owner, whether it's Glock, PDP, 320, any of these. I'll say like mainline guns from any of the big manufacturers. That's a really good place to start for a first time gun owner.
It's funny. I mean, in our group chat, we have a lot of friends that are trading out different guns or get acquiring different guns and trying different things. But yeah, that's, later down the road when you're like, okay, I want to test this out. I want to test this out. Oh, how does this gun function? How does this gun function? And there can be a method to the madness of trying different things and trying out different manufacturers and such. But yeah, I definitely agree. Getting something that's proven and reliable and such is definitely a good key starting point.
Yeah.
So yeah, we touched on a little bit of those remedial actions. Um, what about like holster work or drawing or anything like that you want to touch on for a new gun owner?
Sure. Holster work's interesting. It's interesting because in our experience, in my experience, working for a store that has a range, that has a training program, you see a significant drop off in people who take level 1 courses to the number of people that take level 2 courses. And really the primary difference between a level 1 and a level 2 course is the holster. Myself and Rachel, my fiance, we're talking about this the other night, and we were kind of comparing notes about our thoughts in going over the show notes for today. And that holster aspect of it, I think, scares a lot of people. It scares a lot of people because it's expensive. It's a very personal decision. What holster is going to work best for you, for your gun, for your setup is definitely very personal. And then, you make the wrong decision. You decide you don't like something. What do you do with it? Like, how do you get rid of that thing?
I have a box of holsters.
Yeah, man. I mean, a lot of gun guys, myself and you both have just boxes of holsters where, sure, some stores will buy them, but your $200 holster, you're probably going to get like $20 from a store for it at the end of the day. So you do risk losing a lot of money. My recommendation is really start simple. And again, integrating your holster into your dry fire work is a really, I'll say, fun, easy way to then help you gain the confidence to take your skills to the next level. It's as simple as, I think you mentioned it in the dry fire episode, where it doesn't take a lot. It takes 20, 30 minutes. Let's say you're doing the laundry or something. You're cleaning the house and you're waiting for pasta water to boil or whatever. Like you're chilling. Throw on a belt and go to a store that potentially has like a bargain bin of used accessories, and pick up a holster, as long as, of course, it'll work with your gun. Pick up a used holster for like $10-$20, or find, I don't like Amazon special stuff, but find an Amazon special holster for $30. It doesn't have to be a long-term solution, but if it gets you started, and then you can put on your favorite like Western movie and act as though you're like play drawing on the cowboys or whatever, like whatever makes you do the thing, which is practicing the manipulations of your firearm. Integrating a holster into that, especially in the home before you maybe take that next step to a level 2 course, is coming back to those fundamentals, a really good way to drive home just those manipulations. So that way, when you're on the range, cool, maybe it's loud and scary, but at the very least, you know that you have a really solid framework for handling the firearm in that environment.
Hmm. Yeah, and if you want to speak to what's considered like a holster qualification, obviously you need to have at least some basic level of competency when you're at the range, showing that you can handle a firearm safely. Probably want people to go through a 101 class before they're drawing from a holster at a range, right? So you have to you do have to prove yourself to the range safety officers to show that you're not going to harm yourself or others when drawing or reholstering your firearm. So there's to the folks out there that are trying to figure out how to incorporate holster work into live fire, yeah, you're gonna have to go through a couple hoops, really just for the safety aspect, and it's for like I said, safety for yourself and for others at the range. But yeah, that dry fire definitely leads to competency when it comes to the live fire aspect too.
Yeah. I think gamifying it is a lot of fun too. I like data. I like quantifiable things, and one of the ways that you can really track yourself. You mentioned it before. Some of the dry fire systems that you've talked about. A really huge tool, in my opinion, is a shot timer. This comes into play both in dry fire and in live fire. In dry fire, I have like one of the packed timers.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not the most expensive. You can spend a couple $100 on a shot timer. I think these are like $100 or $130 or something. Not the most expensive, but you can use it to then set like a start time and what's called a par time. So a par time is, think of like par for a golf course. A hole is a par three. That means that I'm not a golfer, even though I've worked at a golf course. So take my words somewhat with a grain of salt. But my understanding of a par time is that it's what the average golfer should be able to get the ball in the hole by, roughly speaking. So a par time in shooting world is what the, again, average, we'll say, shooter should be able to complete a course of fire in to some degree of accuracy. So in the case of drawing from the holster, you can then pop out your packed timer or your shot timer of choice, and be careful because they're very loud. At least the packed timers are extremely loud. I still remember my first time hitting the packed timer indoors in like a regular room, and my ears were ringing for quite a while afterwards. So just be aware of that. Some of them do not have adjustable volumes and are very loud because they're meant for you to be able to hear them over gunfire, not in your living room. But yeah, take the pack timer, and for me, roughly, I'll set it to 1.3 seconds, give or take. And like you've mentioned in the past, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. Pick a light switch. Pick like a random portrait of a tree on the wall. What have you? Pick something depending on the degree that you want to challenge yourself, and then sit there, and when you hear the first beep, draw from the holster. When you hear the second beep, aim at that target and try and have the trigger squeezed and have the striker hammer fall on the gun before you hear that second beep or that par time. It's also fun with multiple people too, right? You can, if you have someone else who you shoot with regularly, whether it's a spouse or otherwise, have both of you, stand side by side and try and do the same course of fire, whether it's one reload one or just a draw fire one with a par time competing against each other. It's a lot of fun, and loser buys dinner kind of deal. Like you can really have a lot of fun with dry fire and get a lot of really good practice out of it.
It's kind of like horse in basketball.
Yeah, man. Yeah, straight up, it is.
That's cool.
Number one rule in gun safety is to have fun.
I mean, in a sense, it's true. I mean, and it's you want to have fun when you're doing a hobby, and sometimes people get into this sport because it's a hobby. Sometimes it's, for defense reasons. Sometimes it's for collecting. And, we kind of went over that in an earlier episode, but, there's so many ways to get involved. But at some point, it all boils down to we enjoy it and we want to have fun. So
it's fun, and that's okay. And I think in the internet gun space, sometimes we overwhelm ourselves with this focus on, if you don't have this thing, you're not going to make it when everything goes sideways. And that's, as the gun space has evolved, there's these people that prepare for these doomsday scenarios, but at the end of the day, we all got started because it was fun and it was amusing. And the more time I spend in the industry, the more I realize that it's okay just to have fun, or just to buy a gun because it makes you happy. I'll caveat that statement by saying, as long as you know that that's why you're doing something, as long as you know, I'm buying this because it makes it happy, not because it's going to be a fun gun to shoot, but it just because of looking at it on my shelf makes me happy. And that's okay. That's totally cool.
As long as you got that disposable income.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Like, don't waste the rent money on guns. But
right. Cool. So before we get into like live fire and working at the range and doing stuff there, is there anything else you want to touch on when it comes to dry fire at the home?
I would say something that ties the two together is filming yourself while you shoot.
Oh, that's a good thing. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that.
I will say this: when I go to the range, I almost constantly have my phone out in front of me, whether it's on the table or next to me if it's on the bench, and looking back at yourself. And I think this goes for a lot of hobbies, especially sports, which at the end of the day, shooting is a sport, although I'm sure some people will debate that. It is a sport. And watching yourself back will help you significantly realize, okay, I did this thing, my bullets went here on the target, but I couldn't feel, or I couldn't tell in the moment what caused that to happen. Okay, cool. pause the recording on my phone, look at it, flip the video, and see what actually happened. And then you realize, oh, I didn't actually have a proper grip on the handgun. And in the moment, I didn't realize that, but actually looking back at the video, and we're talking just set your iPhone up or what have you, Android on the table, that's a huge tool with the convenience of modern technology that is at our disposal. And that can be used both for dry fire and for live fire. And slow-mo too. Slow-mo just A, looks cool, and B, talking like reloads and stuff, if you're practicing your dry fire on your reloads and hopefully not dropping mags on your toes because that hurts. Ask me how I know, because I've done it. Or on your cat, which I've also almost done, but that's fine. She got in the way.
It's her fault.
Yeah, it's her fault. She should have known. So with reloads, like you slow-mo that down, and of course in your head, okay, like I should index my finger on the front of this mag and point to the mag well. And in practice, in that dry fire rep, your reload feels great. But then you take a slow-mo video and you look back and you realize, okay, wow, I thought I had actually indexed properly on the mag, but I was actually just like holding onto the floor plate of the mag, and that's why when I went to go insert the second mag, I just totally shoved it into the mag well of the gun instead of actually into the grip of the gun.
That literally happened about 5-6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So in the group chat. So
Yeah.
that was, I'll admit it, that was me. And
Yeah, man.
And it felt good. I think I was trying, and I'm not even going to make up the time. I feel like I was trying for like a 0.8 or 0.9 reload or something like that.
Fast.
Fast.
Yeah.
I was, but that was the intent. I was trying to go fast. It felt good. I accomplished it, and I was like, "Hey," to the group, I was like, "Hey, got this." And Tyler was like, "Well, yes, but," and he described the exact scenario because he slowed it down and he went like frame by frame, and he's like, "You didn't, do a proper index.
Mm-hmm.
If you try that, multiple times, you're gonna fail, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not stable. So
Floppy
it's
mag in your
floppy
finger.
mag, exactly, yeah. So I'm grateful for that because he pointed out a flaw that I needed to work on. So it's making sure that you have a good index point and just that you're doing the proper mechanics, and just
which you wouldn't know if you didn't slow it down.
Exactly, yeah. So it just points out everything that you're talking about. And thanks, Tyler.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so Dom, that's a good segue then. As we're going to the range, you kind of intimated before, it's like, okay, you want to go to the range with the plan. You mentioned about a shot timer. As a new shooter, what's something that you would recommend, to somebody going for their first, second, third, fifth, 10th time to the range? They're still new, right? They might be at 200, 300, 400 rounds. So what would you recommend doing live fire? Assuming that they've done some dry fire, what are some drills or something that they would probably want to be working on, in their first few visits?
I will say this. I kind of gauge how I start a range trip based on how I feel. And I think this is important for a new shooter going to the range as well. You can kind of tell how ready to go you are on any given day when you're going to the range. Maybe you kind of feel like you're dragging yourself there, but you didn't really want to go, but you really know that you should because this is a skill you want to excel at and learn about. Or there's a day where you go and you're super gung-ho, you had a great day, you got a raise at work, whatever it may be, and like you're ready to go, you're amped up. I think your training routine in the range should reflect that to some degree. Kind of match your energy with the plan that you have when you go to the range. And then of course everyone knows themselves better than anyone else does, so I personally know that when I go, I really like cold start drills.
Can you explain what that means to the listeners? Yeah,
totally.
Nice.
So a cold start drill is, and there's all of these terms are somewhat nebulous, and everyone has their own phrase for it. But my definition of a cold start drill would be something that in some way simulates or replicates some sort of scenario that integrates multiple disciplines or manipulations. So it may have movement if I have the space accessible to me to do that. Ideally it has reloads. Ideally it has target transitions. And then, if it happens, talk about malfunction clearing and stuff like that. But I like sometimes starting off with the hardest thing possible or one of the hardest things possible. So that way I know right from the get-go where, what I'm trying to work towards. And then honestly, I like ending the range day with the same drill sometimes. It's a really good metric of, okay, I came in and I was really feeling it, and even though I felt great after doing that first cold start, I did notice I had a slight hiccup on the mag change, and I felt like my grip after the mag change was a little wonky. After shooting and after doing some of the more unique and kind of like individual skill set drills throughout the range day, I then revisit that entire cold start, and then I can see how just that 1 or 2 hours improved the same exact thing that I started the day with. So those are a lot of fun. And honestly, there's the other end of the spectrum, which sometimes I'll do as well, which is purely just like an accuracy drill. Having access to, and working at a place that has a 25-yard indoor range, something I like to do, honestly, a lot if I go to the range and I'm feeling a little more dreary, tired, more like I want to kind of have a slower start to the range trip, I will do basically 25 rounds, 5 yards at each distance, or 5 rounds at each distance from 5 yards to 25 yards. It'll just be offhand, unsupported, and slow fire. And that's kind of just to get the juices flowing, basically. And that, honestly, I'd probably recommend more for someone who's just starting out. Although cold starts are fun, if your manipulations aren't there and you're throwing a lot at yourself right away, it could be borderline dangerous. So for your if you're just starting out, I would really recommend something simple, like I said, 5 shots at every 5 yards, or if you're on a more constrained ammo budget, 3 shots at every 3 yards. Basically, enough shots to get a feel for what your grip and trigger finger and how your vision's doing on that given day.
And then there's things like you could do target transition drills in a way, like say you have just that piece of cardboard. You could do transition drills where you have like those adhesive circular targets that the shoot and sees.
Yeah.
You could pop one of those, a little bit lower, and then have one a little bit higher. And then if you wanted to work on target transitions, you could, kind of shoot at the high one first and then the low one, take 2 shots at each, or do one back and forth, for 5 shots. It's kind of mimics a bit of a target transition. It's not, like an actual quote unquote target transition where you go from one target to another. It's still within, probably 2 feet of each other, but it actually, it could work. What do you think of that?
100% could work. I'll take it even one step simpler, which is that the shoot and see targets are cool, but at the end of the day, they are an expense. I will say this: when I go to the range and when I shot today after work, I'm a trash panda, man. Like I dig through the garbage and I'll find these targets where people shot out, like someone must have used 4 targets and they shot out the center 6 inches of each target, but the rest of this piece of paper that's like 3.5 feet tall by 2.5 feet wide is just bare. So I'll take out targets like that. I'll chop out the center portion, and then realistically speaking, you can use the center portion of that target as your aiming point, because you know that if you're not having any hits on the rest of the target, your shots are going through the center of the target.
Oh yeah, like an anti-target.
Yeah, kind of like an anti-target.
That's right.
Like if you clip anything else, if you clip any of the unshot portions, you missed, and then if you're not, it's kind of unsatisfying. But if your rounds are going straight through the center, in theory, you shouldn't be breaking any paper where there was no shots before. But I do that a lot, where I'll literally go and I'll take little miscellaneous sized pieces of paper from partially shot targets, because a lot of people just shoot the center and throw the rest out. Granted, it's paper. You can call me cheap or whatever. That's cool. But it's, I'll just staple up random pieces of paper around the target and then label them like ABC 1, 2, 3, and then pull up a random number generator, a random letter generator on your phone, and tell it to pick a random letter, a random number in those ones that you put up, and then you have a little course of fire you have to shoot. Honestly, I just came up with this off the top of my head, and I'll probably do it when I go to the range next. But there's a lot of really awesome tools you have at your disposal, and that don't really cost a lot of money in terms of both the targets and how you can make courses of fire that are randomized but also useful.
That sounds like a fun idea, and it does kind of remind me of, oh gosh, it was at SIG. I forget which course it was, but it was one of the rifle courses. And back in the back in the back where they have like I think it's a 270 range. They have like the numbered and lettered steel, and it's the instructor will call out 1A 3F, right? And then you have to engage in that order. So it's kind of like what you're saying, with that random number generator. You're doing it yourself at the range, which is cool. But yeah, I'm just kind of illustrating that it's not just something that you'll do by yourself. You might encounter instructors that incorporate it in their training lessons and their classes.
I would say something I like to do too is I will layer skills in a given range day. So even if you start with a cold start, I think it's important to then like strip it way back to the basics and just do some slow fire stuff, and then maybe integrate some doubles, and then integrate target transitions. And what I mean by doubles, for those who may not know, is a double is basically, it's a drill common for competitive shooters because you're normally going for your best 2 hits on paper. So you take your gun and you shoot basically 2 shots as quickly while still maintaining decent accuracy as possible. It practices, basically recoil control, which is the core thing that you should be looking to practice while at the range. And then after you've integrated that recoil control, integrate like a reload. Practice different kinds of reloads, right? You have emergency reloads. They're also known as like slide lock reloads. You have tactical reloads, if you will, which some people love, some people hate. I'm not here to debate that.
That's a whole other topic.
Yeah, it's a whole other topic, man. Sometimes you have reloads where it's the last round but your slide doesn't lock back. There's a ton of avenues you can go down, but I really like layering a range day. So start with, regardless of if you start simple or you start with like the most complex thing possible, just to really challenge yourself right out the gate. I like then peeling it back to the most basic skill and then adding those layers, kind of adding the layers to the onion slowly but slowly until you kind of work your way back up to, if you started with a cold start, work your way back up to a drill that contains all the stuff you practiced with that first thing you did.
A little bit of a fun anecdote. So it ties in with exactly what you were saying of how you will sometimes start with like the very basic of skills to start off a range day, right? So I just recently got the SIG P226 and I was really excited because it's one of the classic line pistols. And as you know, Dom, I have been shooting the P320 for years now, whether it be training classes or just my own personal training or matches or anything like that. So I went to the range, brought my 226, started gripping and shooting it as I have been shooting my P320. Got to the last round in the magazine and it wouldn't lock back. And I was like, that's weird. And I tried the other, I think it was two or three magazines that came with it. And I was like, it's happening on every single magazine. I thought maybe there's, some break-in time that it takes with the springs. And I couldn't figure it out. So I was like, okay, no problem. I'll figure, do some research. So I asked one of my buddies who actually works at SIG, and he was like, well, have you adjusted your grip? I was like, what do you mean? So we were walking through, I presented out how I was gripping it, and he said, oh, your dominant thumb is catching the slide lock. I was like, you're kidding me. And I didn't even think to notice it because it just is it's just the natural place for my thumb to be relaxing on. And it's a slightly different location on the 226 than it is on the 320. So it was just a one of those light bulb moments that it sometimes is good to have other people with you while you're training so that you can have somebody else help you diagnose something. Now, eventually, could I have diagnosed it? Probably, but it would have been, extremely frustrating. But it just goes to show that each gun has its own differences between, other guns that you might be shooting.
It's things like that too, where it's fun to have. It's fun, not only fun to have other people at the range with you, but it's also useful. Because a lot of people, I think, assume that guns are just supposed to work, and that, like, in this day and age, a gun not working means it's a problem with the gun. There's a lot of times where in diagnosing issues with, I'll say issues in quotes again, with guns, it actually turns out that it's user error.
Totally.
And I don't say that disparagingly. It's just a matter of if you're new to something, you may not know the intricacies of what you just mentioned, which is you hold a 320 versus you hold a 226, 229, what have you, and then because of your hand size with the shape of that grip and how the gun recoils, it just so happens that your thumbs land in just the right spot.
Exactly.
Because of how you've trained to get to that point with one gun, that on the other gun, the gun doesn't function as it should, but it's not the gun's fault.
Exactly. Yep.
Which is it's fun to see the eye-opening interactions I have with people when they realize that and they go, oh, so I have to kind of like shift. I kind of got to like shift what I'm doing here. I'm like, yeah. And that's where that training thing comes into play too, because you know that because you shoot a lot, and shooting's a very depreciable skill. It very quickly, you lose the feel for it essentially. And it's little things like that where it's more important that you go to the range and you really practice with the tools that you have, because if you had to use it and then you're in that situation where you would know your gun's empty essentially, but you're not familiar with it enough to the point to understand that because of how you grip it, you're not going to lock the slide back on empty. That could be really genuinely dangerous. So I think it's kind of the responsible thing to do, and not only for yourself, but for those around you, to really, really get to intimately know your firearm and how they interact with your hands while shooting.
When it comes to live fire, Dom, so you have 25 rounds that you shot, you got 25 more rounds that are in a box. How are you going to know where your hits are impacting if you already got 25 holes in the paper?
Good segue.
Yeah.
A really useful tool, and there's tons of I'll say more expensive variants of this tool, such as the paster gun you got chilling right over here, which is awesome.
Yep. That's really my competition.
Yeah.
Just I don't use that on just normal range days. I don't want to waste it.
You don't whip it out at the public range.
I'll just use my masking tape.
I like putting those on other people. You go behind someone, you sticker them with a target pasty.
We did that at League Night, and
that's mostly why we buy that stuff.
Pretty much, yeah.
So a really affordable option that allows you to then know where your shots are going. A Sharpie, in particular, and I'm not like sponsored or anything by this, but like the absolute chunky big Sharpies that are meant for like marking pallets and like warehouse Sharpies. I buy a pack of these every couple. I'd say every 6 months I buy a 3-pack of these things.
Oh, you go through them that much?
Fairly quickly. I also give them out to people on the range a lot. I use it to write tags and stuff like that. So I use this at work, but I also have one of these in my range bag. So one of these massive like warehouse style Sharpies is a really, really helpful tool for a range bag. What it does is, and what you said in terms of helping you know where you're shooting, is you get to that point where you've shot the target and kind of the middle third of the target we'll say is shot out, to a point where you, without someone else looking at the target, can't really tell where the next shot is going. What you can do at that point, I'd recommend pick a different spot on the target. Like I said, most people, when they use targets, they shoot out the middle, chunk of it, basically the center mass, and then they throw the rest in the garbage. The rest of that is awesome material. Most people can get away with buying a fraction of the targets as they do when they go to the range.
Right.
If they just, once they shot out the middle, they then just switch to another spot. But between reps, I tend to bring a target in and I'll just put a little tick next to each bullet hole with the Sharpie. Or if I'm shooting like different rounds, or if I'm doing different drills, one time I'll do tick marks, the next time I'll do circles, so I can kind of keep track of what's what. Like let's say I'm doing some stuff with 5.56, and then I'm switching over to 300 or 9. Of course, the hole's going to be different, but it can still be helpful to mark them differently or by different colored Sharpies. I've seen people with like a green, a red, and a blue Sharpie in their bag. Another reason they do that is if they're shooting with multiple people. You can then say, all right, Jeff, you're going to be blue and I'm going to be green, and then that's how we know like whose shots are what on the paper. The other thing with having a Sharpie in your bag that I find useful is it makes the ammo last longer, especially if you pause between reps to mark your target. I very frequently see people, and over the years I've seen thousands of people do this, where they kind of come in, they load up their mags, they shoot through all their mags, and then they're done with 200 rounds, which is a decent chunk of change. That's a couple meals worth of money. They're done with 200 rounds and they still have 20 minutes left on their range time, and then they leave early. Buying a Sharpie is really a small investment that can not only help you keep better track of your hits and then get more usable data in terms of seeing what your bullets are actually doing on paper, but it also can help you, as the name of the episode entails, get the most out of your range day. It's really gonna make your ammo go farther, go last longer, than if you were to just go in with fully loaded mags and blow through them in 2/3 of your range time and sit there looking around for the rest of the 20 minutes, basically.
Yeah, and then I do find it, well, I guess there's a few different schools of thought, and we kind of touched on this. It's like, yeah, you're totally okay going to the range and, blowing off some steam and, knowing that you're going to do that, you just want to, get through a box and just kind of forget about the world and just have some fun, right? You can absolutely do that. And then there's the opposite side of the coin where it's, I have a tailored, focused plan that I want to do today. And sometimes that might be a 1 reload, 1 drill, or a 2 reload, 1 drill, or, controlled groupings of 3 within, 3 seconds or something like that. It's not that you would always be going to the range and loading up your 10, 15, 17, 21 round mags and you just keep loading them up, right? And that's another way of time management. It's like, okay, I'm going in with empty magazines. I'm loading, okay, on these 5 drills, I'm going to do a 2 reload 1. Well, okay, I'll load up my 3 magazines and I'll load up 2, and then I'll load up the other 3 magazines with 1. And then you have 3 with 2, 3 with 1, and then you do that reload drill.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
cool. You're not just blowing through, 50 rounds, just with 3 loaded magazines kind of thing.
Yeah.
So not in addition to the Sharpie or the tape or whatever, you're able to do a little bit of time management with, how are you balancing your magazine reloading?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great point. And I mean, this all comes back to getting the most out of your range day. And yeah, part of that is time management, and that's not necessarily to say getting more done in less time, but sometimes it's to say getting more done in more time, because most people don't go over their time when they come to the range. Most people leave early. I would say on average, you're talking probably, if someone books an hour, they're normally leaving around the 40 to 50 minute mark. So there's a lot of time left on the table that, realistically speaking, could be taken up by, instead of loading the mags to full capacity and instead of shooting through the mags all at once, you load them up to partial capacities that correlate to the drills you're going to shoot. And then between each rep of each drill, you take the target in, you mark it, you maybe take a picture of it. Again, you don't have to record yourself, but you take a picture and then you have a note on your phone that says, like, hey, okay, on this range day, I did this and these were my results. And then you really have a way to track yourself as time goes on, and you can see, cool, I did this same drill 6 months ago and I did it today, and my grouping is 3 inches tighter today. Like that's awesome. And I feel like it incentivizes people to then want to keep moving further and further in the sport.
Yeah, for sure. It's a good transition because I also want to touch on like the difference between bullseye shooting and like precision versus what's good enough, and when does, quote, good enough, when is that good enough? You know what I mean?
I think it's interesting. If you were to work on a range and watch how most people shoot, most people do kind of what we just referenced, which is they come in with their mags fully loaded, or they fully load their mags, and then they shoot through their mags in their entirety, load them up again, shoot through the mags in their entirety, kind of till they can't see where their rounds are going, and then they pull a target and replace it and kind of rinse and repeat for the hour or whatever they rent the lane for. However, I think if you ask a lot of people, at least in the U.S., why do they own firearms, you're going to get a lot of that prepared citizen response. I think there's a lot of people in the United States that take pride in the fact that they feel as though they are a protector for themselves, for their family, for their dog, whatever it may be, and a firearm is their tool that they want to use to be able to do that. However, I'll say this, if you're going to the range and you're kind of just shooting at what I would call like bullseye shooting, which is kind of no speed, no heart rate really going, just kind of shooting for accuracy without any other manipulations built into the drills that you're doing. Not only is that something you could do at home with or without some sort of dry fire trainer like the Mantis, or just picking a light switch and pulling a trigger, so you're essentially somewhat wasting time and money by being at the range and doing that, but that doesn't really get you into the realm of what I would call acceptable accuracy or practical accuracy. You hear about this a lot in the competitive shooting sphere. Guys like Ben Stoger and everyone and anyone who shoots at a high level, they say that it's okay to throw a Charlie occasionally in a stage if it means that your time is better because of it. And I think a lot of people that are super serious think competitive shooting is just purely a game and isn't applicable to real life. But if you look at the size of like a Charlie on an IPSC or a USPSA target, it's fairly practical for vitals. So if you're going to the range and you're really just picking like a single point the size of a 2-inch bullseye and you're saying, I'm just going to try and hit this for all 200 rounds that I brought and then leave, the reality is that if you had to use your firearm, I'll caveat this by saying that I'm not someone who's been there or done that. I just consider myself a enthusiast and a prepared citizen who's kind of decided to make this my career. If you had to use your firearm, although you want to pick a small spot to aim at, and then theoretically you miss less by doing that, you're not shooting a bullseye essentially. It's not bullseye shooting. So you talk about throwing a few Charlies in a competitive atmosphere if you're shooting a competition. I think the same applies to if you're going to the range to practice your skills that you don't want to have to use but potentially may have to use someday as a protector of your home and your family. I think it's important that you kind of push yourself and you throttle yourself up past 110%. Of course, safely, and an indoor range is a really safe place to do that. You kind of work your way up these percentages until you go past the point of like, okay, I hit a delta basically, which is where you're in like the outermost section of a silhouette target, and then I need to pull it back 10 to 20 or 20 to 30%, then that's my sweet spot where I am basically getting effective hits on paper, but I'm also doing it in a timely way where I'm not sacrificing time trying to hit the dead center of the target every single time, which comes back to what we talked about earlier, which is kind of defining your purpose for being at the range. Are you there to practice, practical skills? Okay, push yourself a little bit. Are you there just to like blow off some steam, have fun? Cool. Bullseye shoot all day, focus on one spot, and just keep punching it. Either is perfectly fine as long as you kind of have in the back of your mind why you're there on any given day.
Both disciplines are helpful. Like you have, for example, if you're trying bullseye shooting, right? It is or can be slower, and you're not trying to get your heart rate up, and it's good to have. Well, not only is it good to have that reassurance, like when you're getting that repetition, you're getting that sweet spot, but you're able to see the results of that continued practice. And partially you have that, you'll have less of that jerking the trigger, you'll have less of those grip mistakes. And what I've personally seen is when I try to jack it up to the those 90, 100, 110 percentages, it's like that's when those mistakes start to come in. That's when I'm seeing, okay, well, I'm trying for 3 rounds pretty darn quick, right? Whatever that means. And I like say I'm going for 0.15 splits. That's really hard to do.
That's a lot.
Right? And
that's fast.
Honestly, I think the best that I can do within a alpha and Charlie zone at 5 yards is like 0.17. So like that's not sustainable, right? Yep. Like I could only do it for like 3 shots. I'm still working on it, but at the same time, it's like I know what my breaking point is there, and I know what I need to work on. So when if I'm throwing deltas, it's like, okay, well, I'm not there yet. So just keep training, and you work up to it, right? So sometimes it's nice to go back to that bullseye where you work on those fundamentals, you work on that grip, you work on where your fingers are placed, where your thumbs are placed, and you just have that refresher. It's like, okay, I'm good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think this comes back to all the tools kind of culminate into what we're talking about right now, which is you can have your phone set up to take a video of yourself, and then you have your shot timer, and then you have your Sharpie in your range bag. So, you start your phone, you do your 2 reload 2 or whatever it may be, stop your phone, pull the target, mark the shots, of course, remember exactly where they were. Look at your shot timer. Look at, your first shot time, your split times, which would be the time between any two given shots, which, like you mentioned, a .15 is like pretty blazing. .15 is gnarly. Some people can't, people can do it, but
I know a couple that can do it. Yeah.
yeah, man, that's wild. I mean, I'm like .18, .19 accurately on 5 or 7 yards on a good day. But all these tools really, really culminate in kind of what we're talking about right now, which is, yeah, if you're there to get the most out of your range day and really practice with your tool in a way that helps you be a more prepared citizen for anything that may happen. These things all give you quantifiable results that you can then store away and use over time to track your development and your journey in the shooting sports industry, which is very cool. And I think personally for me, it's a motivator. I said earlier, I kind of use my Instagram to track my own journey. And I look back occasionally to videos of myself from when I first started, before I was carrying appendix, before I had done a lot of work to my handgun to get where we're at, before I'd taken a bunch of classes. And I kind of cringe at it. Like, it's hilarious. But at the same time, I then look at that compared to where I'm at today, and it's incentivizing. It's a big part of the reason I kind of keep doing, and it's a big part of the reason I want to help others grow, with me and past me and towards where I've gotten to in my career and in my journey in the industry.
So, as a range safety officer, what would you say are some do's and don'ts for people who might be going to the range for their first, second, third time, or things that that maybe they should watch out for?
Sure. I would say that one of the things that's huge is, of course, know your main firearm safety rules. There's multiple variations of these depending on who you ask or how they learned it. Primarily, you got keep your finger off the trigger until your gun's pointed in a safe direction, your downrange, whatever that may be. Keep your gun unloaded until you're ready to fire. Make sure you're aware of your target and what's beyond it. Know the status of your firearm. Again, there's variations on that depending on who you ask and how they were trained. I will say at our range in particular, if you look down on the mats that are on the tables, those are actually printed, those variants of those 4 rules are actually printed on the mats. So by and large, if it's your first time in a gun store or first time on a gun range, whether you've taken a class before that or not, I would say those 4 main rules or variants of them are important. Our range in particular, and I'm sure most other ranges, will typically have a poster, or I'm sure they'll give it to you if you ask for it. They'll have a more detailed set of rules. So one that's honestly really common that slips a lot of people's mind is they set their gun down on the back wall, or let's say they bring in a rifle in a case, and they set that case down on the back wall of the range, which is give or take 8 feet from the firing line. And then they start unzipping or unclipping the case, and then they go and they pull out a shotgun and immediately flag every single person as they then turn around and then walk straight into their lane.
Right.
But it's extremely common that you'll get a lot of people, and I couldn't tell you the last time I've done this, but I could almost guarantee you I've done this at some point or another early on in my career, where you don't sit there and think, okay, like, sure, I'm in the range and sure, I know I'm handling an unloaded gun, but what does this look like to everyone else, right? If the guy in the stall next to you turns around and you're partway turned around walking into your stall with the shotgun you took out of your bag on the back wall,
Right.
all he knows is you're walking in his direction with a gun pointed right at his knee.
Right.
So it's like, that's a big one that a lot of people, we have to kind of jump in and very quickly redirect them in a safe direction. Another common one, you'll get my gun's unloaded, so it's fine. That's a very common one, both in and off the range with people trading in guns. I'd say not that consistently, but every here and again, every couple of months, you'll get someone who says, yeah, the gun's unloaded. It's not. Even though we have a sign that says, please clear your firearm and put a chamber flag in it and all that good stuff. But same thing goes for the range. Just be aware that specifically on, I'll say, public ranges, ranges where you don't have to be a member of them to shoot there. You can walk in off the street, pay a flat fee, and then get the range for a set period of time. The rules are definitely a little more strict than going out into public land and shooting with your buddies. So that can be a little, I could see how that could be a little stressful for some people, because at least in this area, we do get a lot of people who grew up shooting on public land back when there was more space available in the area to shoot, and they come in and all of a sudden they're like, oh, I have to make sure I don't shoot the ceiling or the floor. And like, that's kind of scary, because that means I only have X amount of feet tall that I can hit on the target, and then if the target's at 5 yards, I'm going to hit the ceiling, or vice versa. So
then height differences too, you got to worry about, you know,
Yeah.
people having some height disadvantages.
yeah,
So
I kind of just threw a lot out there, but there's it really comes back to don't be afraid to ask questions. I think that's a huge one. ROs, our range safety officers, they're all there to primarily keep it safe. We can help a little bit in terms of instructing, although the primary goal of a range safety officer is not to instruct, it's to make sure everyone's being safe and having fun. If someone looks like they need a hand with something, we'll step in, but if all 8 lanes are going at the same time, we do have to kind of make sure we're keeping a bird's eye view of everything, because 8 people all with guns in their hands, some of which might be machine guns and who knows what, like it's a lot, man. So we're really there to make sure you're having safe and having fun, but we're also there to ask away if you have any questions.
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and the other thing is the rules might differ from indoor range to indoor range, right? When you were saying, things that they have to watch out for, of, as a newbie to the range, or a newbie to just shooting in general. Another one that I know for sure you've had to turn people away, and maybe not you specifically, but make sure you're wearing closed-toed shoes.
Yeah, no Crocs, man.
No Crocs.
Even if you got socks on, no
Yep.
Crocs. That ain't cool.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yep. So yeah, just be mindful of like you said, just be mindful of the rules that each range has.
I got another weird dress code violation for you, and I'll address this as carefully as possible. Specifically with women, be careful with the cut of your shirts. This is, again, as 2 dudes, I'm addressing this as cautiously as I possibly can here. But we have seen people, let's say they're coming to the range with their boyfriend, their family, what have you, and they're renting guns they've never shot before. And I myself today, I don't know if you saw my story, I took a piece of brass to the eye today where it bounced off the wall and then got behind my glasses and then like burnt my eyebrow and like smacked me right in the eyeball. Kind of sucked.
Wow.
Brass
And
is
that's even wearing glasses too.
and that's wearing glasses, dude. It snuck right in there.
Wow.
So this comes back to the closed-toed shoe thing, which we do get a lot of pushback from people, especially in the summertime on that. Because a shooting range, especially one like ours, where it's larger and somewhat known in the couple states that we're in, people come to it as a destination. So that they'll show up in like flip-flops and essentially crop tops or what have you, and like pretty comfortable for an 80-90 degree day in New England. But unfortunately on a shooting range, especially if you're not well versed in the manipulations of a firearm and not comfortable enough to handle the gun safely while you're also getting a hot piece of brass, whether it's out of your shirt, out behind your glasses, or in between your toes, that is why rules like that exist. And even ranges that don't have those rules, I still do recommend people that are newer to the sport do kind of dress appropriately for it. Again, girls with making sure your shirts are higher cut, anyone with closed-toed shoes, and then glasses. Me personally, I'm probably not going to wear my hat backwards on the range now as much as I normally do, because immediately one of the dudes who saw the video that I work with said, yeah, you should have been wearing your hat forwards, you dummy. So, outfit comes into play too. And a lot of times rules aren't just rules because someone made them up. They're rules because something happened that caused them to be a rule.
Yeah. And you might be wondering to yourself, why are you going over all this? Well, it kind of gets back to, we want you to get the most out of your range day. We want you to have a good time. We want you to enjoy yourself. So, and then, there's countless other rules that, may be in play depending on what range you go to. So yeah, this is not an exhaustive list, but yeah, just as an overarching thing, just be mindful of the range that you go to, of what the rules are. Some of the rules might might seem silly, right? And there was a range that I belonged to. It was an outdoor range, and there were some really frustrating rules that they had, and I wasn't a member of that range for too terribly long, because I was like, I can go somewhere else and be able to focus on the drills that I know that I can do and focus on. It comes down to, like, doing movement while shooting, and
Yeah.
it was an
Yeah.
outdoor range, so you should be able to do that. And
Ideally,
this
yeah.
one, did not allow that. Even when you can prove to this, the people that run it, that you're capable, it
Yep.
just depends on what their rule set is. So, okay, I mean, if that's a rule set, that's a rule set, but you can go somewhere else.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's a free market, A, and B, we are handling things that are containing explosions.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. So, like you said, there's rules for a reason
Yeah.
at each place. And again, when it comes time to when you have the skill set that you're able to do more advanced things, then yeah, find a place that you're able to practice those advanced things after you've done that dry fire.
heck yeah.
So what do you think about classes and how that might factor into range days, like doing training classes and all that?
I will say classes are very important, but we do see sometimes people that want to rush through them. And recently we reintroduced some classes called like the skill builders, or the 1.5s. So the purpose for these 1.5s are to give people another opportunity to practice some of what they learned in, whether it be the 1.0 or the 2.0 class, specifically the range portion of that, which is the classroom portion is important, of course, but we're all taking these classes to learn how to shoot better, which involves getting out there with a gun in your hand and seeing how that feels. So a big important thing between classes, and to get the most out of your classes, I would say, is to go to the range between the classes. It's very tempting to want to kind of speed run a curriculum of classes, especially I'd say our classes are pretty fairly priced, and we try to offer them on the weekends, and frequently enough that you can kind of make your way through the curriculum fairly fast. But that dry fire at home and that range time between the classes is, I'd say, just as, if not more important than the classes themselves, because that's where you cement what the instructors told you. And sometimes, I'll be honest, with a full class, let's say you have a full class of like 12 or 16 people, with one or two instructors, depending on the availability on a given day, it's a lot. As coming from the context of ROing a range with 8 people on it, it's impossible to sit there and look at every individual person and make sure, or give corrective action to everyone at the same time when they're all shooting at the same time. So it's really, and that's why private instruction is so important. But I'd say if you are able to afford private instruction, because it's very expensive, but if you're able to afford it, that is a huge tool. That one-on-one, or our range particular offers group classes where you can do basically 2, 3, 4, you can get together, buy a chunk of private instruction, and then have a more individualized training session with one of our instructors, which I think is huge, because with that you get very specific attention, and they can really hone in on exactly what you're doing with your hands on your gun on that day that's causing your shots to all go left, right, high, or low, whatever it may be.
Yeah, I definitely want to echo that, because there was something, I think it was with I learned this, it was the original P365 that I have. It was the first gen, and what I didn't know is that the sights were definitely sighted in, but it was a different sighting system of like how the dots were aligned.
Yep.
And I just didn't know that, so I was like, why is this shooting low?
Like target hold versus combat
Exactly.
hold.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So I was like, I don't understand. My other guns don't do this. And I booked time with Dylan back when Dylan worked at White Birch. And I was like, hey, can I just get like an hour of your time so that I can figure this out? I don't know if it's me. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And he's like, yeah, sure. No problem. And I think it was within 5 rounds, he's like, oh, it's target hold versus versus combat hold. I was like, oh, geez, okay.
Yeah.
So, but from that first, 3 minutes, we had 57 other minutes that we were able to, work on some other things, which is great because we got to, Dylan's a great instructor, and
Yeah.
I was able to learn a lot from him, in that session. So you go in for one thing and you might end up learning 5 or 6 different other things because you might have something very easy to fix or something like that.
I'd build off of that with this, and I don't know if specifically the manual you get with the SIG would have explained that to you, maybe, or maybe it would have said the sights are zeroed at roughly this distance with this ammo.
Right.
However, something I've been telling people recently when I sell them a gun is to go through the manual that they get when they get the gun. It sounds really stupid, and if I would have been on the other side of the counter and been told that by myself 3-4 years ago, I probably would have shrugged it off and thrown the manual away. But I did, I recently just bought a new 22 bolt action, and it sounds silly again, but I kept 2 things. One, I kept the label from the box that has the gun's info on it, because when I appraise a gun, that's like the most useful information I can have, is knowing the exact model and stuff like that. And 2 is I kept the manual from the gun. Everything else I immediately threw out, besides the mag that it came with, but packaging and everything I threw out and recycled. But I actually sat there and read through the manual a little bit, and once you get through the I'll say lawyered up pages that have every single warning under the sun, like, don't drink water while you're shooting or whatever else is in the first 20 pages of the thing.
Right.
You get some really good info. The other thing is a lot of these manuals are digital too. So like, even if you lose your manual, in the case of this gun, I wanted to adjust the trigger pull weight. So I knew that, I looked it up online, but also online is a PDF version of the exact manual I have. And if I had thumbed through the manual, I would have been able to learn how to adjust the trigger pull weight to lighten it up. The manual tells me how much to torque the screws that connect the action to the stock of the gun, what the proper torque is for those, which if you didn't know that, whether you read it in the manual or look it up online, not doing something like that after disassembling the gun could lead to accuracy issues. So there's a lot of really good info, and again, as dorky as this sounds, like, take your morning coffee one morning and read through the manual that came with your gun, because I can almost guarantee you, if all of us did that, even those of us that have done this for a while, we'd probably learn something new about a lot of the guns that we have that we didn't know before, just because we never took the time to really dive into it like that.
Yeah, it's like people reading the manuals of their cars or, of their appliances in their home. There's, if you have to change a water filter in your fridge for your water dispenser or something. It's like, people definitely don't read that. They might not even know they have a water filter.
Yeah, literally.
So, but yeah, anything else that you'd like to touch on for today?
No. I think this was super productive.
Awesome.
I really, really appreciate you guys. Like I said, I'm honored you guys are willing to have me on. I hope to be back. This was fun.
Yeah,
I kept the cuss words at bay this whole time, so that's cool.
We appreciate that.
Yeah,
keep it family friendly.
Yeah, I don't think you're gonna have to bleep anything.
I got nothing to bleep. Yeah,
that's
cool.
You're
golden.
Made your job easy.
Yeah, Dom, thank you so much, and yeah, we're honored to have you because we've been trying to make this happen for quite some time, and then we got. I think 2 snowstorms right in a row on the weekends in February. So
yeah, 2 snowstorms. I almost died with the flu. I don't know what else. But
yeah, it's been a long time coming.
It's been a minute.
But we really appreciate your time here. And Marvin, sorry we couldn't have you for this evening. This time I know you have some commitments tonight, but we'll definitely have you back on for the next one. But yeah, Dom, thanks again, and I look forward to having you again soon. Everybody, enjoy your range time, get your dry fire in, get some live fire, but have a great time.